My name is Alyssa Greeley. I am a leader in the Fitch-Rona HSM home group, and today we're wrapping up our series, Everyone's a Cactus. Over the last few weeks, we have heard how awesome and complicated cacti are. One aspect of cacti is that when you get close to one, it'll poke you. And trust me, it hurts. When that happens, what should we do? If we are continuing with the metaphor that everyone is, in fact, a cactus, then when we get close to one another, we're gonna get hurt. What happens then? I believe that God leads us to forgiveness in situations in which someone has wronged us. Before we get into why that is, let's define forgiveness. Now, I'm going to kind of go into a pretty lengthy definition here, but as I read through what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not, feel free to pick out one or two things that really stick with you and something that you might pull out from the definition. Here we go. Here's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is letting go of emotions like anger, resentment, or shame towards a person or an event. Forgiveness is treating the person who has wronged us with compassion and empathy, even when they might not deserve it. Forgiveness is an active choice, and sometimes a process. It doesn't necessarily happen all at once. Forgiveness is actually something that can happen without anyone else's knowledge or participation. Forgiveness is less about the person being forgiven and more about the person doing the forgiving. And sometimes, the person that I'm forgiving is myself. A lot of times there are misconceptions of what forgiveness is. So I want to make sure to touch on some things that forgiveness does not mean. Forgiveness is not condoning or excusing hurtful behaviors. Forgiveness doesn't require you to suppress anger and act as if everything is fine. Forgiving does not mean that you forget. And it also doesn't mean that you have to repair or return to a relationship that has caused a lot of hurt. So now that we have a better idea of forgiveness, why do we care? What does this have to do with Jesus? And heck, what does this have to do with cacti? Well, when we look at Jesus' last moments on earth, we see the most radical act of forgiveness in history. Jesus was beaten, he was mocked, he was humiliated, and he was suffocated. But one of his last sentences is him asking God to forgive the people who have wronged him. What? Jesus demonstrates for us what true forgiveness is. He saw the ugliest and prickliest sides of humanity, yet he made the active choice to forgive us and to restore us back to him. In light of this radical act, God asks us to respond to wrongdoings against us with forgiveness. In Romans 12, Paul asks us to act differently than the rest of the world. And when other cacti want to seek out revenge or harbor resentment, God calls his cacti to freedom from resentment and anger, to be compassionate and empathetic towards others, and to forgive ourselves so that we can start to see ourselves like God sees us. Because of how Christ has forgiven us, we can take steps to forgive others and ourselves. I have had experience with having to take steps towards forgiveness between me and my dad. Growing up, my dad made some mistakes, and I began to develop a lot of anger, resentment, and hurt towards him. It started to seep into every interaction that him and I had. I felt weighed down by something that I couldn't quite place. It took me 22 years. That's longer than most of you have been alive. But I eventually was able to be honest with him about how I was feeling and choose to forgive him for past choices and actions that had hurt me. Now, did that automatically change our relationship? Did I never feel angry or hurt again by him? No. But I did feel lighter. I did start to see him as a complicated cactus that had a story of why he might be a little prickly. I was able to have more compassion and empathy towards him. I felt freed. I don't know who you need to forgive. Maybe it's a parent, like me. Maybe it's another family member, or someone who used to be a friend. I don't know what happened between you. I don't know what kind of resentment might be binding your heart. But my deep desire would be that you could experience release from that crushing feeling, and that Jesus is the one who can release those binds. Jesus forgives you. Jesus forgives me. Jesus offers forgiveness to everyone. And he wants us to experience the benefits of freedom, empathy, and love that come along with the act of forgiveness. I hope that as we move on from our time together and you start small group time, that you're able to have authentic conversations in your small groups and be able to discuss who you may need to forgive in your life. Do you need to forgive yourself for anything? What misconceptions do you have about forgiveness? And how can practicing forgiveness help us to be better friends, family members, and cacti? Bye, friends.